For today's model, we're going to actually engage with the CIA to offer a perspective. Now, some of you might think, how can the CIA help us enhance our mental self-fortitude and personal effectiveness? And it would be a good point. In fact, the CIA is drawn from a bit of Stoic philosophy, and this helps us direct or redirect our emotions and activities. It is a simple but effective mental model of how to compartmentalize our responses to events. And as you can see, it helps us, any barrier or roadblock that we're faced with in life will either come under a category of control, influence, or accept. By definition, if a roadblock and barrier is something we can control, we need no other outside help with this situation. It's on us, we can deal with it. It might be something that we can help influence, thus the term influence, where we might have to have a brave conversation, ask for resource, ask for budget, ask for help, but we can help influence that situation. And then by definition, if it's not within our sphere of control or influence, it's in the accept category, and we have to show a radical acceptance for that situation. And certainly the COVID-19 outbreak is a huge aid. It's in the accept category. So to help us with this, what I'd like you to do is engage in an exercise. For this, you're going to need a pen, pencil, and a piece of paper. So if you haven't got those right now, maybe just pause the video and go and get them. And the exercise I'm going to ask you is a question. So what is the biggest roadblock or barrier that you currently face in managing your work in the current constrictions and circumstances? So I pause the video and write that down on a piece of paper. Now, the job now is then to say, well, does that fall under something I can control? Something that I need, that I could influence, or is it just something I need to accept? So part two of this is looking at what are the main challenges with managing my home life under the current constrictions and circumstances. What is the biggest roadblock and barrier that I'm faced with at the moment? So again, write that down, pause the video and write down what is the main challenge that you're faced with at the moment with managing your home life in the current situation. And again, after you've done that, think about, does that fall under, the CIA? Which aspect of that does it fall under? Something I control, something I can influence, or something that I just need to accept? So the difficult thing here really in this model is looking at the aspects between those things I need to show radical acceptance to, and those things I should and could proactively influence. Because this is not a get out clause. It's not by saying that we need to write things off that we need to accept, where we should and could positively and proactively influence that situation. But then again, it is pointless trying to change something that is not for changing. There is a quote, or actually it's called the Serenity Prayer, that can help us with this, but attributed to Reinhold Niebuhr. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And that sort of sums up the conundrum of the CIA model, but it gives a real indication of those things that we should and could positively control and influence, and those things we need to accept. And with the radical acceptance, there is a term that we can use, which is sumo, which is the self-talk that we can give ourselves around, if it is in the accept category, let's just shut up and move on. It is what it is. We are where we are. Now, what can I do to positively control or influence the situation? So it might be useful now to make some time to note down aspects of the working environment or life in general that we need to sumo, i.e. they're in the accept category. We understand, or in self-reflection, I appreciate that these are emotionally difficult for me, but I just need to accept it. And there is something very therapeutic about getting things out of your head and onto paper. So take some time again, pause the video and write down anything that you feel is in the A category that you just need to sumo. During his interview with Sean Dyche, the Burnley manager, Simon asked him about controlling the controllables and how it applies to the domain of elite sportsmen and women, in this case, the Premier League footballers.
That many things outside of you, that many things that can happen. Therefore, the biggest thing you control is what your part of that is. So it's quite simple in my view. If you're a footballer, we're using footballers, obviously. You've got 11 others out there trying to stop you do what you do. You might have fans and away ground. You might have a referee. You might have linesmen. But you can only, the one thing you can control is you, your performance, and even before the performance, your readiness to perform, your prep, your organised self-organisation, your understanding of what the team needs, your sometimes emotional situation, family, everything, park it all. And then you've controlled the situation to allow yourself that when you go on that pitch, you've done everything. I call it the tick boxes. You've ticked all the boxes to be ready to go and perform. So that's a controllable in my view.
So observations about that particular answer that Sean gave around controlling the controllables. He referenced the referee, the linesman, the fans, the competition, all things that are out there in the A category. But he was also indicating that what he holds his team responsible for is their own behaviour about their readiness for the game, their preparation, their self-organisation, understanding the needs of their team, and really understanding their own emotions. And we will come to a tool that will help us with that next. How does that apply to us in our work job? Well, there are some analogies there. Sean talks about the referee and the linesman who control the rules. So that could be the systems, the processes, the governance of the organisation you work for. The fans could be the stakeholders, the people look at your own performance, and obviously the competition is the competition. All things that are challenging control, but what we can be responsible for with our own behaviour is planning, preparation and execution of the key areas that make success happen for us. So what is the set of business tools that can help us with CIA? So we look at there about CRM systems, PowerPoint, mobiles, PCs, playbooks. None of these really impact our mental self-fortitude. We're relying on ourselves. So how about thinking about our brain as the most important business tool, actually life tool, that we have? So you might actually ask, what's the difference between the mind and the brain? And it's a good question. And this is where neuroscience, modern neuroscience really helps us out, because we pretty much know that the mind is what the brain does. I'll say that again. The mind is what the brain does. And we know this because if I was to lose a little bit of my finger, that would hurt, the big ouch. It would probably incapacitate me a little bit, but I'd pretty much get on with my life. If I was to lose a similar amount of brain tissue, depending on what part of the brain it came from, it would alter my personality irrevocably, or it would grossly impair my gross motor skills. So how much do we actually know about the brain? So here we go. Here's a quiz for you. So again, armed with pen and paper. Don't spend too much time over this. The first the first answer that comes into your head. So how much does the brain weigh? So the brain weighs on average 3 pounds, which is the UK measure. I think it's 1.5 kilograms. What percentage of your blood and oxygen does it use at any one time? Answer, 20%. How many neurons in the human brain? So this is quite staggering. There's 100 billion neurons in the human brain. So there are as many neurons in each of our brains, and there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. And we all have one. We all have one of these. Lucky us. What percentage of the brain is fat? And that is actually 60%. And then finally, define the term neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. So the brain is the most complex organ in the known universe. And as I say, we all have one between our ears. Lucky us. So the observation, if you're anything like the delegates that go through the workshop, is the realization is we don't really know a great deal about the most important business tool that we have, or life tool, our brain. So the good news is there is a model that has been devised by a gentleman called Steve Peters. And Steve Peters is a psychologist, a sports psychologist. And he has worked with some of the top athletes in the UK, certainly in the cycling teams, where from our perspective in the UK, we've been very successful. And what he's done is he's introduced a model which breaks down the way we think and emote and feel, so can look at our own minds very simply. Now, it is an oversimplification, but it's incredibly useful. So Steve Peters breaks down the way our mind works into 3 discrete areas. The first is the chimp. So some of you might have bumped into his work in the Chimp Paradox. So the chimp is responsible for fight, flight, freeze, our knee-jerk reactions that were essential at 150,000 years ago when we were in the savannah, and we needed a reactionary part to keep us alive. So this has a lot to do with evolutionary psychology. This is the part of the brain that reacts to situation. It doesn't think, and so we fight, we flight, we freeze. But it managed to get our genes through into the next generation. He talks about the human, and the human is the most advanced part of our brain. It's what gives us our self-awareness. It's what gives us an element of self-control and to reflect on our own minds and our own thoughts. And it sits about there. And he calls that the human. And there is the third part, which is the computer. And the computer is like a database that stores in the information. So it's either full of self-limiting beliefs driven by our chimp, who ironically is trying to protect us, or over time we can develop our human sense to give us a greater sense of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. And it might become aware to you that there is a battle going on between the chimp and the human. So if we reflect, we probably recognize that our chimp can get us in an awful lot of trouble with fight, flight, freeze and knee-jerk reactions to events. And then we need to calm down, and the human kicks in and takes control, and then we apologize for our behavior. So if we look at that, one of the things we can do to build the self-awareness and the emotional intelligence is recognize the chimp in us all, and recognize some of the behaviors that it drives in us. So here's an exercise for you. I would like you to, again, hit the pause button and spend some time and give your chimp a name. So my chimp's called Brian, it's alive and kicking. But by giving our chimp a name, we can start to distance ourselves and build what we call the emotional pause button, where and the quicker we can hit an emotional pause button, we can offer a given response to situation rather than a knee-jerk reaction. The chimp is responsible for the knee-jerk reaction. The human is responsible for our capabilities to be able to respond. So the exercise, give our chimp a name and write down 1 to 3 of the destructive behaviours we would rather manage more conducively. So hit the pause button right now, spend some time, give your chimp a name, and then write down the 1, 2, or 3 destructive behaviours or behaviours that you recognise are driven by your chimp that you would rather manage more conducively. So let's look at the takeouts of today's module. We've got a mental model, CIA, which allows us to compartmentalize our emotions and our activities aligned to the challenges and the aspects of those challenges that we can control and we can influence, and those that we need to show a radical acceptance towards. We have a mental model of the way that the mind works. We understand now the chimp, the human, and the computer. And the most impactful thing we can learn to do is actually control our own mind. We will look at some tools which will help us to do that and enable us to focus on the key activities that causes success to happen to us and how we manage distractions, including the whole topic of mindfulness, which allows us to be much more in the moment. The next module will be presenting on some tools and techniques that help us with resilience and well-being. If you have any questions about today's module or any of the forthcoming modules, there is a link below. Please click on that and ask any questions or observations you might have about the content or the applicability that you've had presented. And we will look to answer those questions in Module 6, which will be the clinic.
So thanks for watching Module 2 on CIA, and look forward to seeing you again during Module 3, which is the module on resilience.